Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, Wales, I'm doing a review of Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Now, as I said in a video I put up the other day, I'm going to spend the next year reading classics, one a month. The first of which is Moby Dick. So the list of classics I'm going to be reading is taken from a fantastic video that Michael K. Vaughan put up with his recommendations for 12 classics that he thinks are worth reading. And yeah, the first of those was Moby Dick, and I really enjoyed it. If the other 11 are as good as this, I'm very happy about my decision. I suspect that they won't be. I suspect that I won't enjoy them all quite as much as Moby Dick. But this really was a fantastic book, and I can completely understand why it has stood the test of time. I did it as a buddy read with Juan from Plagued by Visions, who is far smarter than me when it comes to literary criticism and things like that. And we had some really good chats about it. And he provided some really interesting insights. The first thing to say about Moby Dick is that it is a daunting book. It was written 150 years ago, it's 650 pages long, and it's famous for the fact that Melville interweaves into the story chapters which are about the history and the practices and the laws of whaling. So there are effectively two books mashed together into one. There is what is basically a seafaring adventure story about a ship hunting a whale, and in particular Captain Ahab, the slightly deranged captain of the ship, whose leg was taken by the great white whale Moby Dick at some point in the past, and Ahab has sworn revenge and has been chasing Moby Dick ever since. So you've got that story, which is on the face of it an enjoyable, exciting, tense kind of adventure story, and then you've also got these non-fiction elements, which are literally about whales as animals, about how whaling is conducted, all kinds of different things, and that seemed to me going into it to be something that might be problematic. In fact, I remember an English teacher of mine when I was at school recommending that people read a version of Moby Dick that had those chapters stripped out. I didn't read it at that point, and I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I waited and read the whole thing, because actually I think it works brilliantly when you do put those two things together. So the story, as I've laid it out, is simple and well known. It is literally Ahab and his crew searching for Moby Dick and then trying to kill it. What's fascinating about it is the narrator. So the book is written from the perspective of one of the crew, who's called Ishmael. It has that famous opening line, "Call me Ishmael," although it's not actually the opening line of the book. The opening line of the book, I think, is the book starts with pages and pages of quotes from famous people about whales. But the first kind of line proper of the book is "Call me Ishmael." And Ishmael is just such a fascinating character, because when you read the book, all these non-fiction parts about whaling do not come from Melville, they come from Ishmael. And it's made very clear, he is quite a present narrator. And he talks about, his own theories about this, about the industry and things like that, which makes it a really interesting read. You really do feel like you're getting to know Ishmael as a character, both through the kind of action scenes in the book, which he describes, but also through his almost obsessive interest in whales and whaling. He comes across as a very eccentric character because of the lengths he goes to describe the different types of whales and things like that. But it all makes for a really wonderful read. One of the things that's really fascinating about it, and I was reflecting back on the book The Terror by Dan Simmons, which I read a little while ago and reviewed on the channel, which again is set a kind of similar-ish time, and is about a long sea voyage. And this concept that you would go away to sea for literally years at a time, away from home, away from your family, crewed with the same group of people, I think is absolutely fascinating. And Juan pointed out in the discussion we had about the book that really Melville creates this mini society on board the ship, where the rules are quite different from normal society. You know, there are no women, there's a set hierarchy, there's a hierarchy around race and things like that, so there are many different nationalities and races on the boat. And one of the things that also is interesting is, whilst there is that hierarchy of race, and there are certainly black characters who are less well treated than their white counterparts, Melville does seem very open to different cultures, and discusses those at length. One of the other things I found really interesting when reading the book was thinking about it in relation to the kind of books that I think of as being from that era. And I think of things like, Jane Austen, about tea parties in country homes in the UK, rather than about a rough group of sailors at sea for years hunting a whale. So one of the things that Melville goes to great lengths to describe is the importance of whaling to that kind of polite society. So one of the things that the whalers go to sea to get is whalebones for whalebone corsets, and ambergris to make perfume. So you get these men battling against the elements, battling against gigantic whales and trying to land them and haul them onto the ship and butcher them in order to get these things which are required by the women who are in Jane Austen's books. It's a fantastically weird contrast. And Melville, through Ishmael and his fascination with whaling, really brings that to life wonderfully. And it felt by the end of the book that it almost feels like a non-fiction book about whaling that's had an adventure story put into it rather than the other way around. I really do feel like the two parts were essential to each other, and I don't think I would have enjoyed either book if I'd read them as two separate books. I'm fairly sure I wouldn't have enjoyed either of them, but taken together they were just beautiful. It was fantastically well done, and I'm sure there are more modern examples of books that do something similar, that take this kind of detailed, dry, analytical kind of text and mash it together with something more colourful and enjoyable. But I can't think of any. So if you do know any, do let me know in the comments, because I thought it was a wonderfully interesting way to write a novel. So that has felt like a successful first month to my classics journey, and has given me confidence that some of the other books I'm going to be reading, which might seem a bit daunting, as Moby Dick did, probably won't be quite so bad after all. So yeah, very much looking forward to it. I think next month I'm going to read the Iliad by Homer. So I did read the Odyssey when I was at school, but I've never read the Iliad. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the kind of the Greek war aspects of it. I'm less looking forward to the fact that it's a 600-page poem, as I'm not a huge fan of poetry, but we shall see how I get on with it. So if you've read Moby Dick, do let me know in the comments what you thought of it. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're really good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.